Ready to go.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the Poverty Reduction Policy Development Committee. Nice to see you all. Happy New Year. We're going to start with apologies for absence. So I have received apologies from Andrew Davis and Kelly Roberts. And
also from Erica Krishna.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. So Kelly isn't going to be joining us at 3:30 on Mondays, henceforth, because of a clash with work. So we will have to have a discussion, perhaps before the next meeting, about an alternative time slot. Okay. So the next item on the agenda then is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Does anybody have any? No. And then the minutes of the previous meeting. Can someone who was there please agree that these are a correct record?
Move, Chair.
Thank you, Chris.
Seconded, I suppose.
Thanks, Roland. Right, okay, so that brings me on to our work plan update. So I'm just going to give a really quick verbal update of where we are on everything that's on our current work plan. This is going to be a short meeting today, guys, and then we're going to be staying on afterwards for a working group meeting for all those that can. Okay, so by way of a verbal update then. We can start with, sorry, bear with me, I've lost my notes. I'm going to start with the Fairness in Green Health policy. I do have an update here from Martin Nichols, who has not yet had an opportunity to discuss this with the relevant cabinet member, or at least we think the most relevant cabinet member, because this does cut across a number of portfolios. But Martin is certainly the relevant director, so he's waiting to have a chat about this with Councillor Mark Thomas. But what he is keen to do is to progress the corporate tree policy, and he's looking to add our Fairness in Green Health policy into that as a specific section, so that the corporate tree policy makes reference to the policy that we've been working on. And he's going to bring that back to this committee at the appropriate time for us to look at. So I think that's a really good development. And also, Martin has been looking around for funding that can be used for tree planting, essentially, and any other green interventions in deprived areas. So even though we haven't moved forward with the formal adoption of the policy, it's really great that he's already looking at how to work in the spirit of it. I think he's certainly taken on board the messages that are in that document, which I think is really positive. Okay. The promoting affordable credit, again, we're waiting now for the consultation on that policy, which Anthony Richards is going to be moving forward. He's absolutely snowed under at the moment. I think that team is particularly under-resourced, the Tackling Poverty Service. And Sean, who normally works with him, is recovering from an operation, so even this overstretched team is down on its normal numbers. But hopefully he'll be able to progress the consultation quite soon, and we'll be able to share that around and get a good response to that. The corporate debt policy. Now, I think that only 2 people from this committee have offered to join a specific working group on that. So that's Peter Jones and Leslie Walton. If anybody else has the capacity to join a specific working group on the corporate debt policy, I'd be really, really grateful. Chris, you have your hand up. Did you want to come in on something? You're on mute though, Chris.
Just to say, I don't mind joining that group.
Great.
And just to bring up, really, I don't know whether people have seen, there was an email out on the 19th of January from Julian Morgans about council tax reminders. Yeah. That's what I was looking for. Just to say, you know, that we're going to start chasing people for council tax, basically, but in a nice way.
Thanks, Chris. I do have more of an update from Julian on that specific matter, which wasn't on my list. So thank you for reminding me. Let me find my notes on that and I'll share that with you now.
Okay.
Right, so I asked Julian about an update following the sort of what they call the soft reminder, the nice letter that went out to everybody. And he's saying there was no real impact on income, so arrears continue to increase. But the good news is that it has nudged a lot of people to get in touch. So he's found that a lot of people got in touch because they were paying the wrong amount in error. So I think with all the kind of chaos related to COVID-19, people hadn't caught up with the fact that their direct debit no longer matched what they were meant to be paying. So I think obviously, you know, a friendly letter saying, did you know that you're in arrears, is much more appropriate for those people than kind of going in all guns blazing about non-payment. So a lot of those have been resolved, which is good. And lots of little minor errors in like the spelling of people's names or the dates of people's occupation of properties, they've been resolved, which is good. There's been a lot of referrals to advice, to citizens' advice, and there's been some claims of council tax reduction taken up and some discounts on council tax have been awarded, all as a result of people getting in touch because of these letters. So Julian's happy that the letter has prompted more engagement from taxpayers and that that's a really positive thing. So he thinks the reminder process generally is going well and contact is picking up. And the most unhappy people in Swansea at the moment with regard to council tax are the owners of second homes who are now having to pay a 100% premium from the 1st of April. So there we are. So that's
yeah. Can I just add something about that? I understand that. I understand that, you know, that we obviously we're in favour of people paying 200% council tax for second homes, but I know personally of a person who was in the middle of doing up a property. It's actually my next door neighbour. Okay, she's been very ill with cancer, so she's been fighting cancer and trying to get her house done up at the same time. Because of COVID, she can't. She's currently living in, her sister died of cancer a couple of years ago, and she's still living in her sister's house that she inherited. And that lady at the moment is having to pay 200% council tax. So I know that she's the exception that proves the rule, but there may be others out there as well. I mean, she can afford it, but she's having, you know, she's had some difficulties, and there may well be other people who are in similar situations because of COVID and all the other issues that we've had. I'm sorry to bring it down to just, you know, a personal remark, but I couldn't let the opportunity go by without mentioning that there are other people out there in different circumstances.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. And now, when this policy did come to council, there was a lot of concern raised about people in exactly this sort of situation, particularly if people have been subject to a really kind of traumatic or unexpected bereavement and then left with a property that they've got to deal with. That can take a really long time. And of course, the COVID situation hasn't helped with those timescales.
No.
My understanding is that the policy has been written in such a way that the council can be quite flexible and lenient with people in that sort of situation. So I would definitely want to stress that your neighbour should, if she hasn't already, she should have a chat with the council tax team about this situation, because there may well be some flexibility that she isn't aware of. And if you like, I can ask for a short paper to come to this committee to be absolutely clear on, you know, the flexibilities in that policy.
Yes.
Because, yeah, we're about making sure that people in good, you know, people with the right intentions aren't being clobbered accidentally. That's really what we're concerned about in this committee, isn't it? So let's ask Julian for a summary about of you know, who the policy can be made flexible for in certain circumstances. So we'll look at that next time.
Thank you, Mary.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Now I've lost my notes about what I was going to talk about in my updates. Bear with me. Won't be a sec. We are going to be discussing the socioeconomic duty, which goes live in Wales on the 31st of March. There isn't much to report as yet, but Joe has drafted a briefing paper which I will circulate to the group and which we can discuss in our next working group meeting. And what we need to be doing really is kind of clarifying where we fit in. So I have started discussing that with the Deputy Chief Exec. Councils all over Wales are just at the point now of kind of working out how this new duty is going to fit in alongside other equality duties and strategic decision-making processes. So that'll be something for us to discuss further in the working group initially. Okay.
Sorry, Mary. Mary,
Sorry,
can
yes.
I interrupt? I'm not hearing you very well. So unfortunately, I don't know what subject you're talking on. Sorry, I missed the beginning, and after that, I'm afraid I couldn't catch up.
I'm going to put my headset on because I know the microphone on this computer isn't very good. Okay, hang on a sec. Is that better, Leslie? Is that better? No. 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 Okay.
That's worse, Mary.
Yeah, that's worse. That's worse. I know why. There's another piece of this that's gone somewhere else. So I'll just talk up, shall I? I'll just shout a bit. Okay. So Les, I was just talking about the socioeconomic duty. So when the Equality Act was first written, it included all this stuff on protected characteristics and fostering good relations and not discriminating, but it also included a duty to assess, for public bodies, I should say, to assess the impact of their strategic decisions on socioeconomic outcomes, on poor outcomes associated with socioeconomic status. So in plain language, to me and you, that means making sure things don't get worse for people who don't have much money. And because there was then a change of government in Westminster in between the Equality Act being written and it actually being brought in as the Equality Act 2010, we all know what happened in 2010. So the incoming Home Secretary, Mrs. Theresa May, decided that we weren't going to enact the socioeconomic duty. So it's been there on the statute books, but without actually being enacted. And then Scotland did enact it in 2018, and Wales is bringing it in this year. So there's a big discussion to be had about what the duty means for us. So in my WLGA role, I've been quite involved in this. There's been ministerial working groups kind of talking about what needs to be in the guidance. I will send round a link to the non-statutory guidance which has been published so far, which I actually think is really good. It's quite clear and quite easy to engage with. But also Joe has written us a briefing paper which does summarise a lot of that. I think the hardest thing is this. The duty applies to strategic decisions. And what it says is that when you're making a strategic decision, you need to pay due regard to the opportunity to improve outcomes related to socioeconomic status. So you've got to be looking at whether you've got the chance to improve things for people on low incomes. And I will keep bringing it back down to that really basic definition of low income, because no one's ever explained to me how any negative outcome associated with socioeconomic status couldn't be improved by people having more money or couldn't be avoided by people having more money. So I think that's the simplest way really to conceptualise the duty. The problem though is what actually counts as a strategic decision. So if you let if say you have a team of people whose job in the council is to support members of the public to claim benefits and to represent them at tribunals, and they gradually start leaving and getting other jobs or taking early retirement, and before you know it they've all gone, and then there's a budget written up that says, well, we don't need to replace these people, they've gone, and that's a budget saving with 0 redundancies. Where was the strategic decision making that actually flagged up what impact that might have on people on low incomes? See, and this is how you can end, as a public body, you can end up in a situation where your services have changed to the detriment of people on low incomes, and there never was a strategic decision made. It was just an operational decision or something that was just allowed to happen. Now, that situation I've just described to you is exactly how at least one Welsh local authority that I'm aware of has ended up with no welfare rights service, right? And this is it's a common enough sort of tale. So we need to think as a committee about what advice we would give the decision makers of this authority about how to apply the duty in such a way that it doesn't get wheeled out for every single decision that every manager makes every day, but also does pick up on the important things that make a real difference to the people that we're concerned about. So there's a lot more discussion to be had about the duty, and as I say, it comes into force at the end of March. Does anyone have any initial questions about it at this point? No. We'll have a lot more discussion about that in working groups and in this group. Yes, Kat, did you want to ask something?
As a person on low income, and it is definitely there because I am on benefits. I'm not ashamed of it, but that does cut me out from trying to improve myself, because like you can't earn anything extra really, which then blocks you off from actually then coming off benefits because you can't get the experience needed to do this.
Yeah.
So it is definitely a huge barrier. Yeah. And strategic decisions need to consider this, that there are many people with a lot of knowledge that they could bring that are forced out of this like talking point because they can't do it because they lose their benefits. So something needs to be done where people are able to get the experience they can have to improve themselves and live up to their own capabilities. Sorry, that was just my little bit.
That's a really good contribution, thank you. And I mean, the question is, when we're looking at our employability service and our economic development approaches, and we're talking about work experience and entry-level jobs and things like that, is that taken into account? Are we specifically remembering that people who are already in a bit of a benefit trap and they can't afford to come off benefits until they know they're going to be getting a secure and livable income that at least replaces their benefits and hopefully does more than that? How can these people be engaged in learning and employment opportunities? Yeah, exactly.
Well, for me, I'm doing a master's to try and make myself more employable, but it is so difficult to even contemplate.
Yeah, it is, and that's how the benefit system in this country works, as a bit of a trap rather than an enabler. And I hope everybody here is aware that we have passed a motion in support of trialling universal basic income. So, which I think would be a much better alternative to the system that we have. And the universal basic income campaign is picking up nationally. So watch this space. Let me know if you want further info. Right, okay, so we will have more discussions going forward on the socio-economic duty, and I think Welsh Government are going to be putting more resources out as well that we can look at. But in the meantime, the Fairer Scotland duty has got a lot of stuff online, which I think is helpful. I think Scotland is worth looking at. They're 2 years ahead of us, and there's some really good practice there already. Okay, so next, benefit uptake is in our work plan this year. We want to be supporting take-up campaigns. So we are asking Jane Storer, who's the manager of our welfare rights team, to attend this meeting in February to give us an update on the pension credit campaign, which is now underway. And she can also help us then with a discussion about what other specific campaigns we think would be helpful in Swansea. So that's going to be our next meeting in February. And community transport is on our work plan, and this is something that we haven't actually started work on yet, but I would like to draw my members' attention to the new transport strategy for Wales, Floyd been there with. So the consultation on this actually closes today, but I have, after feeling that I didn't have time to get involved in that, I did get involved in it, and I have read it, and yeah, a lot of the comments that I would make are that it doesn't specifically mention affordability in public transport enough. It talks about barriers, it talks about physical and cultural and attitudinal barriers, and it does mention cost as being a barrier for some people, but I don't feel that that it really shines through, that the strategy has an inherent awareness of just how expensive it is to get around. So the consultation response, which I contributed to for WLGA, and which I actually sent in with a different hat on, is focused on that. But it is quite good on involving the third sector. There is a good section on community transport. My criticism of it is that it sees the third sector as filling gaps and sort of bridging gaps left by the main players in the public transport network. Whereas actually my investigation into this suggests that it works better if the third sector, or at least if a well-appointed social enterprise becomes your main public transport provider. We've got some work to do on this area. It's on our work plan agenda, and I think in working group we need to start talking about what stakeholders we would like to involve in that discussion. Okay, so I've got Peter wanting to come in, and then Ryland.
Yes, very quickly, Mary, thank you. You're probably aware, I expect, that there's a developing sustainable transport strategy, which is being led by the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure PDC. And in fact, we had a discussion about this just a few days ago, and that's now moving into an advanced stage. And obviously that's built around active travel. It's also, however, built around community transport, the kind of issues we're concerned with, but being advanced in terms of carbon emission reduction, sustainability in the broadest sense of the term. So there may be, well, in fact, not maybe, there is a clear overlap here, and I think that it may be that we will need to somehow bring the two together, because it seems to me that community transport is really embodied within sustainable transport.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I agree with you, and I think that in discussions of sustainability, you know, affordability often gets overlooked, and it shouldn't really, because sustainability is about people and planet together, isn't it? And it's all very well having lower carbon, lower impact methods of transport, but if people can't afford them or can't access them, then they're not going to deliver what they're supposed to deliver. So we'll ask the other committee to have sight of their strategy, and then we'll see how our work on community transport might fit in. Ryland? You're on mute, Ryland.
Sorry. Just 2 points. One, you mentioned that community transport is often seen as a sort of option of last resort, and I think that's very important because in a lot of cases it is the option of last resort, but it shouldn't be seen by, well, let's be blunt, the public sector or the Labour governments and the Labour councils as the last resort. It should be embraced as a sort of integral part of transport planning, but it very, very rarely is. There's another issue bubbling away in the background which will impact on community transport schemes, which I think needs to be flagged up, and that's the fact that community transport schemes are not liked by commercial bus operators and particularly minibus operators. And there's a case going through the UK system at the moment where a group of bus operators have effectively taken community transport operators to the government and said that there's unfair competition taking place because, of course, community transport uses primarily volunteer drivers. And what the bus companies are saying is that this is unfair competition because community transport operators obviously can undercut traditional bus operators because they're not paying wages. And this judgment or case going through the monopolies process has been delayed now for about a year by COVID. But if that actually is finished off and it comes out against community transport, then community transport is going to be knocked for six on a huge scale, because it will say, the judgment will say in that case that community transport has to operate on the same basis as commercial operators, which will put most community transport schemes out of existence. There's no doubt about that. So it's an enormous threat to the community transport sector, and it's just something that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, can you please keep us up to date on that case? Thanks,
Yeah.
Ryland. The thing, so for the region, the regional economic development kind of peer support network in Swansea, Pembrokeshire, Newport Talbot and Carmarthenshire is holding a regional transport conference in February, at which a lot of these sorts of things are going to be discussed. So members might want to make a note of that conference and book onto it. I'll send a link round after this meeting. If I forget someone, please give me a nudge. So there was an initial roundtable discussion ahead of that conference, which I did attend, again with a different hat on, but it was really interesting, and there was a representative there from DANSA. What's interesting about community transport is that it can be delivered in so many different ways. It can be so many different models. It can be like a dial-a-ride thing, or like a demand responsive kind of being in a car in your neighbourhood that will take a number of people going in the same direction somewhere. So I think that it probably has the flexibility to operate in ways that are very, very different from the commercial public transport network and avoid the threat that you've just described, Ryland. But still, yeah, we need to be mindful of this whole picture, don't we? And I mean, in my view, I think in Wales we've got to try and use whatever devolved powers we have to get away from the deregulation that was forced upon us in the late 80s and has left the whole market in such a mess. So we need to, as a local council committee, all we can do is to try and navigate our way through the current legal context and see where community transport can be supported and grown to fill gaps. whilst accepting that the overall context is deeply unsatisfactory. And I think the sooner Welsh Government takes action on that, the better. I've got Les and then Peter.
Yeah, I think following on from what Ryan's just raised, it shows it's absolutely blatantly obvious we should not be using a commercial transport system in Swansea. That's the whole point. Nor, in fact, should we be using it across the whole of the UK, because I think the whole point is in the word service. And this is where I think the UK government have got no concept of services. Their tunnel vision is all about making money. So when it comes to things like what should be a service, they still think it's perfectly okay for you to make money out of it. No, it isn't. Public transport should be just that, public, and hence not privately owned and people making money out of it. Now, if we had that, then I'm sure in some ways we could then work far better with community transport, and that there could be a level playing field between the two. So for me, the direction we should be really fighting for is to get back and regain, the council regain public transport, and for us to run it, not make a profit, but make sure we pay decent wages to our staff in doing so. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. No, I completely agree. I'm afraid this is the legacy that we've been left with. So it was 1985 that Thatcher decided to try and stitch up public transport routes as money-making opportunities for private shareholders, you know, and inserted all these clauses where, you know, where local councils and the third sector can't be seen to compete with private providers. But there are really well-developed campaigns about all of this, which I think, if the committee would permit me, I will contact and ask if they can recommend some good practice from local councils around the UK that they're aware of, to see how have local councils navigated the nightmare of deregulation and managed to support not-for-profit services. So there is one company called HCT, stands for Hackney Community Transport, but they expanded out of Hackney a very long time ago, and they provide a number of major bus services all over the UK. I think they cover the Isle of Wight and Manchester and parts of the Midlands. And there was a time that I was trying to arrange a conversation between the senior management of HCT and our own cabinet about how working together might move forward, and that's all gone a bit quiet now. But the point is that other models exist. When you look at HCT's website, it's actually quite exciting. You know, they go into neighbourhoods and they work with local people, they get them on training programmes, they give them good jobs. They devise their routes and their services in line with what local people say they need. And it's a social enterprise, so the profits all get ploughed back into the business itself. I definitely believe that these are the sorts of models that we need to be supporting, aren't they? Peter, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Mary. Just quickly. Sorry, I missed part of what Rylan was saying because I had to take a telephone call from a ward constituent on quite an important matter, so my apologies first of all in relation to that. I think I understood him to be talking about a legal case with which I'm not familiar in relation to commercial competition with the sort of community transport providers. I think the key thing here is route, and also the customers that make use or potentially will make use of a community bus service provision. I think I cited before from a previous life the case of Redibus in Reading. As far as I know, is still going, but was certainly very active when I was a councillor in Reading and living in that town. And the whole point about Redibus was that it covered routes that the commercial system, which actually was Reading Council owned in Reading as it happened, but it didn't compete on routes with the commercial system. Instead, it was operating on routes that a commercial system, even a local authority system, would consider uneconomic. So that was the first point, uneconomic routes. And the second point was that he targeted, or at least it was most used by people with physical disabilities of one kind or another, which made it difficult for them even to get to the local bus stop, whereas the Ready bus would come literally to their door and collect them, take them from where to wherever they wanted to go. Later on, would pick them up and take them back home again. That was the whole point of the community bus service provision. So that wasn't competing with the commercial system, it was supplementing the commercial system. I think that's the way you have to look at it for the time being. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. There's a lot to discuss on this. So I think in a future working group session, we'll need to start thinking about which stakeholders we would like to invite to a bigger discussion about all of this and how we would like that discussion to be framed to make sure that the outcomes of it are something that we can work with as a committee going forward. Okay. The only other thing that's on our work plan that I need to give a little mention to is credit unions. We said we wanted to do some particular work to support and grow credit unions, and what I'm going to suggest is that since the Promoting Affordable Credit policy is almost ready for consultation, and then hopefully we'll be kind of rolling out, that would be the point at which we look at how within that, how can we mobilise council resources to have more constructive discussions with the local credit union and to grow membership, so that we do it as part of that new policy. Is that all right with everybody? Yeah, okay, great. Well, that concludes my updates. So the next meeting is officially scheduled for the 22nd of February, but as I mentioned earlier, in order to enable Kelly to join us, we might need to consider some alternative dates. So I will be in touch with the committee about perhaps scheduling that, but we'll leave that one as the official placeholder for now. Okay. Right, so we're going to go into a working group meeting now to discuss other matters, but that does conclude the formal meeting for this month. So thank you everybody for attending.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll stop the recording. Thank you.